There's a generation that literally got split between two eras. They remember cassette players, VHS tapes. They memorized phone numbers, made calls, and just waited for someone to pick up. And then everything got compressed into one screen. That's when the first iPhone appeared. First generation. They saw with their own eyes how the internet completely rewrote the rules of life. Even psychologists still can't clearly define where they belong. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, you sit on the edge, but don't really fit into Gen X or Millennials. It wasn't until around 2014 that researchers gave them a name, Xennials. The time window is so narrow and the experience so specific that sociologists often treat them as a microgeneration. That short stretch of history created a truly unique type of mindset. So let's break down what makes their psychology so different. Imagine this: no internet, no instant answers, no Google, no messages in seconds. You live in a world where boredom isn't something you fix with a screen, you just sit with it. You keep phone numbers in your head if you want to call someone. You wait for the right moment, and your favorite TV shows. If you miss them, that's it. Gone, no replay. And right when you're stepping into adulthood, everything breaks, not gradually, instantly. The world you knew disappears, and a new one takes its place. Digital. This shift didn't just happen during your life, it hit right when your personality was forming. And the effects of that, you're still carrying them. Most generations grow up inside one system, either fully analog or fully digital. You didn't get that. You started in a world where everything took time, and then, mid-growth, everything became instant. Your teenagers and your 20s, they're not a continuation. They're a split. Like there's a line between them that other generations don't have. Think about daily life back then, passing paper notes in class, conversations that disappeared the moment they ended, plans built on trust. You showed up and hoped your friends would be there. No texting "I'm late." No "where are you?" You were either there or you weren't. That builds a different mindset, more responsibility, more patience, more weight behind your word. Then came the shift. By your 20s, everyone had mobile phones. Social media started showing up, first Friendster, then MySpace, then Facebook. Before that, you had maybe 3 ways to reach someone: home phone, work phone, or just showing up. Now, dozens: messages, chats, notifications, constant access. And here's the key part: no one taught you how to deal with this. You didn't transition, you adapted in real time, while you were figuring out who you are. You were also learning how to exist into completely different worlds. And this is where biology matters. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, self-control, and adaptation, develops until around 25. So while your brain was building its model of reality, reality itself changed. That's why it feels different. You didn't just witness a shift, you rewired your thinking along with it. Research, including studies in Nature Neuroscience, shows this clearly. That same brain region matures into your mid-20s, right when your environment flipped. You ended up in a rare position, young enough to absorb new tech naturally, old enough to remember life before it. Gen X met technology as adults, which is why many of them are skeptical. Younger millennials don't really remember life without the internet, but you live both. You're basically bilingual. Not in language, but in reality. You can be offline for hours without anxiety, but you also pick up new apps and systems without fear. And this shows up in subtle ways, like how you think about privacy. You grew up in a world where your awkward moments didn't live forever. Bad haircut, cringe relationship, that one messy night. There's no digital proof, just stories. Your past wasn't archived, it was flexible. Memories changed, softened, turned into narratives. And that's how the brain works. Autobiographical memory isn't a recording, it's constantly edited. But when everything is documented and searchable forever, that natural process gets disrupted, and we're still figuring out what that means. There's another layer people don't talk about enough. You entered adulthood around the time of the financial crisis of 2008. Right when you were supposed to build stability, the world became unstable, and that leaves a mark. Research shows financial stress at that stage creates long-term patterns. Even when things improve, the feeling doesn't fully go away. So you end up with a strange combination: high adaptability, digital fluency, mental flexibility, and a quiet background sense that things can fall apart at any moment. That's why this generation feels different. You didn't just grow up during change, you were shaped by it. And it affects how you think about money, safety, and risk in ways that don't just disappear. You learned to handle constant change because you had to, but somewhere in the background, there's still that thought, what if it all collapses again? And almost no one talks about this. The cultural conversation usually compares Gen X and Millennials, as if everyone in between is basically the same, but narrow time windows, especially during rapid change, create unique experiences, ones that don't fit into clean categories. Xennials carry a paradox. You have the independence and skepticism of Gen X. You grew up before overprotection became the norm, disappearing for hours was normal. You learned to deal with boredom, problems, frustration on your own, but you also stepped into adulthood during the early internet when people believed technology would connect everyone and solve everything. Before we realized it could complicate things to. So now you exist in a strange balance, independent, but collaborative, skeptical, but still open. Digital, but rooted in analog. Maybe the defining trait of your generation is the ability to hold contradictions without breaking. You remember before and after. You see what we gained and what we lost. You don't necessarily romanticize the past because you value modern convenience, but unlike younger generations, you understand the cost of that convenience. You lost true solitude, being alone with your thoughts without effort. You lost the patience that comes from waiting. You lost a kind of presence when attention wasn't constantly pulled away. But you gained something else: connection, access, opportunities your younger self couldn't imagine. And maybe that's why there's this strange feeling like you don't fully belong anywhere. Too young for one world, too analog for the other. Always in between. And here's the important part: that's not a weakness. That's the defining feature. In a world that keeps changing faster than anyone can fully process, going through a massive transition like that is actually an advantage. You've already lived through a system shift. You've already adapted. And that's why your experience matters, not because it's better, but because it teaches something most people are still trying to figure out: how to change without losing yourself. There's also another layer people don't really talk about. You learned how to live without a clear script. Where other generations followed a simple path: a school, job, stability. You didn't really have that straight line. You figured out pretty early on, the world isn't guaranteed to be stable. So you became more flexible, but at the same time more cautious. You double-check more. You question things more. You always keep a backup plan even when everything seems fine. And there's a kind of duality in that. It's both a strength and a source of tension. Because being able to adapt often means you can't fully relax. But this is exactly where something important shows up. This is what makes you especially valuable in the future.